Hi, everyone. Welcome to our pre-recorded presentation, Doing the Work, Centering DEI in OER through Instructional Design and Equity Consultation. I'm Veronica Vold, she, her pronouns. I'm the Open Education Instructional Designer with Open Oregon Educational Resources. I'm joined by my colleague, Heather Blicher, the Open Education Librarian with Virginia Tech, who has also worked on the Targeted Pathways project as both an equity consultant and instructional designer. Our goals for our time together today include recommending tools to promote equity in textbook and course design, focusing on our Doing the Work toolkit. We'll examine instructional design choices that center equity as a through line in OER development, offering examples from our toolkit that model the kind of engagement with authors that we hope to create for students. We'll explain the importance of engaging equity consultants as leaders in OER development. And we'll also develop realistic strategies to manage barriers to faculty participation in equity-minded OER creation, highlighting what worked and what didn't in our own implementation. We hope that this time will be a catalyst for your own continued planning and thinking about how to integrate equity in your OER development program. To begin, I want to offer a brief overview of the Targeted Pathways project. Our project redesigns high enrollment courses that lead to in-demand occupations in Oregon. Our disciplines include human development and family studies, sociology, and criminal justice. Our leadership team supports authors and instructors in creating high-quality, openly licensed course materials with an equity lens that don't otherwise exist. We explicitly focus on equity-minded outputs for student learning. We aim to share course materials that directly address and interrogate systems of oppression, equipping students and educators with the knowledge to do the same. This is especially urgent as we work with public universities and community colleges in a predominantly white state. Portland State University professor Walida Imarisha reminds us that Oregon was founded as a racist white utopia. In this historical context, Oregon students have different advantages and opportunities to learn based on a constellation of identity factors and broader social systems. We know that as a statewide program, we must attend to the impact our design choices have on Oregon students.
Working with a decentralized team from all over Oregon, and in some cases outside of Oregon, we needed to find a way to support the team, especially for authors new to an ongoing project. We asked ourselves, how do we organize all of this information in one place for easy access and future reference? And how do we make sure authors get the information they need to be successful in the project? Because we had access to Pressbooks, we decided to put this tool to use in developing a toolkit of sorts to introduce important concepts and topics. We'll go over two of the key roles in the project, and this will emphasize the challenge of building foundational modules that center equity and the challenge of how much is too much content because we had plenty to share. Our project team has grown over the past 2+ years, and we now have 58 authors, 38 pilot instructors, and 13 team leads and support staff. This includes a project manager, an open educational instructional designer, with part-time instructional designers as well, 2 equity consultants, and open education researchers. These numbers will most likely change by the time this presentation is shared. This creates a number of challenges, and we don't have all of the answers yet, and we're still figuring things out as we go along. This is a pilot project, and as we've progressed, we've made adjustments as needed. In our first semester working with authors, we scheduled and held 2 4-hour synchronous training sessions. The leadership team's goals were to onboard as many authors together so that we could hold mini intensive sessions to discuss the project and create a community of practice for all to take part in. The meetings included highlights on the work with Chemeketa Press personnel, accessibility topics, support available to the participants, and self-reflective activities introducing the concept of DEI and the equity lens in relation to the project. While we had active participation from a core group of attendees, With such a large group, we began to question how we could improve these sessions in onboarding future authors. The obvious answer was to switch from synchronous to asynchronous to solve the issues of calendar availability. But we found ourselves discussing how could we support team integration, accommodate learner variability, ensure participation, and organize information all in one place. My role as an equity consultant is to work with the leadership team, instructors, and authors to ensure considerations of diversity, equity, and inclusion are built into the development process from the very beginning of the project and to keep it a priority. This includes being a part of leadership team meeting discussions, being a part of onboarding new authors, providing recommendations on how to address and solve inequities as they arise, providing one-on-one and group support to authors, and being an advocate. The role grew beyond our original focus as we progressed and secured more funding. We started with subject areas that included HDFS, or Human Development and Family Services, and sociology, and then eventually added criminal justice. A second equity consultant was then added to the team. Together, we developed a DEI-focused module for the project's toolkit to try to center the majority of what we wanted to express to authors coming on board to the project. I say the majority of what we wanted to express instead of all that we wanted to express, because even though this is a recent project, I already have thoughts on what I'd like to add and revise the next time we get the chance. Why are equity consultants important to the project? Ida B. Wells, a Black journalist, activist, and researcher in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, said, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." For the purposes of our project, using an equity lens means shining a light on the nuances of language, content, and design that can intentionally or unintentionally promote inaccurate information that leads to more oppression, social injustice, and disparities we live with today. With so much happening all at once on a large-scale project like this, we have to stay focused on providing the equity lens to ensure we don't lose sight of it as the center of the project. Championing education and the knowledge that results can contribute, even in small ways, to the dismantling of systemic barriers and prejudices, the amplification of marginalized voices, and reach towards an overarching goal to create a more inclusive and equitable society. More well-known challenges include faculty awareness and the need for diverse content creators. I've listed challenges that I'm not sure we talk about enough. Underrepresentation. Think twice about what is considered normal and question your choices on the people and perspectives you automatically think to include in your writing or in your course. Exaggerated negative associations. The content inadvertently reinforces stereotypes based on an individual or structural bias, like highlighting crimes by people of color in a criminal justice textbook. Limited positive associations are done with good intent, but perpetuate marginalization, like reinforcing popular depictions of Black people being successful in sports. And missing stories. In history, the focus tends to be on contributions by white men. BIPOC people, that is, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, made important contributions, but they were less visible or intentionally ignored in history books.
Following the lead of our equity consultants, our instructional design team comes alongside authors and instructors to help design an aligned and responsive learning pathway for students. We help all parts of a book or a course work together in support of specific learning outcomes, and we look for opportunities that center student knowledge and meaning making. Instructional designers also help to answer a key question. How do you help authors who are already overextended and in many cases nearing exhaustion actually engage with training content rather than skimming or skipping content? And then practice that content and receive meaningful feedback on their practice. In the design of this toolkit, we drew on inclusive design frameworks to help authors assess their DEI practice in meaningful and attainable ways. Some of the inclusive design frameworks we use include Transparency in Learning and Teaching, or TILT, Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, Culturally Responsive Teaching, or CRT, and Accessibility. I want to call out some of the essentials of these frameworks that show up in our toolkit. Transparency in learning and teaching is a design practice that aims to strip out hidden curriculum and make the unwritten rules of academic work legible for students and instructors. You'll see TILT show up in our use of learning objectives, signposts, and the explanation of how our assessments fit with our goal. Universal Design for Learning is a set of design practices that begins with learner variability as its starting point. Essentially, UDL recognizes that students possess different strengths and challenges as learners and designs for flexibility and student agency, rather than assuming one size fits all. You'll see UDL show up in both our use of interactives, different means of engagement, as well as use of video and image rather than text alone. Culturally responsive teaching means that educators value diverse cultural backgrounds and diverse experiences as assets rather than deficits. Culturally responsive teaching strives to help students see diversity as strength and to respond directly to inequities that show up in our social systems. It helps students to build critical thinking skills. From a design perspective, it means examining how our books encourage students to connect their lived experience to content, where students see themselves in content, and how students are invited to make that connection explicit. You'll see in our Doing the Work toolkit that we ask questions of educators, calling out their own experience and challenging them to examine where they center student experiences. In designing for accessibility, authors and instructors anticipate common barriers to screen reader software. They also design the scope and length of chapters to ease cognitive load for students, maximizing engagement with the questions and content that matter most. In our toolkit, accessibility focuses on the challenge of designing alt text and image descriptions, as well as descriptive links. In our remaining time together today, we turn to the toolkit itself. We'll offer you a brief tour of its structure and then zero in on some highlights that show interactives and design choices we made to meet author needs. We'll close with a short summary of what worked and what didn't in our current iteration. We wanted to find a way to offer regular and sustained interaction with our equity consultants, our instructional designers, our OER research consultants, as well as our editors, for authors who are, as I said, already overextended and in many cases nearing exhaustion. We also wanted to create a learning pathway for folks who are new to the project, to orient them to what DEI means to us and to explain key domains of authorship through that lens. To that end, the toolkit takes on 5 modules of asynchronous content. We worked with our project team to identify 4 additional content areas to our anchor DEI module to give team members what they need to integrate and apply strategies in content creation. Each module also builds toward a synchronous learning opportunity to join with fellow authors to assess skills and knowledge of concepts. However, this opportunity is optional. If you couldn't come, that's okay. You can still complete the asynchronous activity that will allow you to practice the skills covered in that module and then receive asynchronous feedback directly from our project team. This feedback comments directly on their work and directs them back to parts of the module that might be relevant to revisit. We wanted to model in this toolkit the kind of flexibility and user choice that we hope our instructors will offer students. Finally, this toolkit is designed to be shared. We're in the final stages of openly licensing and proofreading now, and we can't wait to hear from you what you do with it. Please let us know if you decide to adapt parts of this toolkit or the full toolkit into your own OER development program.
And now I have the pleasure to share the components of our toolkit. You can see from our slide that we have 5 modules of asynchronous content, an introduction to DEI and targeted pathways, inclusive textbook revision, working toward accessibility, building OER together for all, equity-minded alignment for course packs and H5P. I'll share my screen and highlight specific sections within these modules. This is Doing the Work, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Open Educational Resources. Starting with the table of contents, you can see we have an introduction and our modules. In the introduction, we orient the authors by including course outcomes, a description of the revising author role and their responsibilities, an equity statement, and a course timeline and activities. Let's go start with Module 1, which is what we refer to as the anchor module because it introduces the user to DEI and how we define it within the project. In each module, we provide learning objectives, and for the anchor module, this includes identifying the importance of DEI, defining DEI and describing the difference between equity and equality, analyzing the impact of language and word choice in your textbook, applying an equity lens to your writing, and recognizing that writing textbooks with an equity lens is labor-intensive work. We want our authors to know what is expected of them, and reviewers have shared with us that including learning objectives for each module has a greater impact. As I scroll through, you can see we're tackling some intriguing topics. Then we come to the Apply and Submit section. There is an Apply and Submit section at the end of each module that provides an activity to complete. We ask users to read the activity prompt and then complete the activity either by joining us in the optional Zoom workshop or on their own. Once they've completed a particular activity, the responsible person or persons is notified to review and give feedback. In this case, it's the equity consultants that give the follow-up. And this is how we engage with the authors in an asynchronous format. Now let's go to Module 4. The section on how copyright laws created the need for open licensing. There is a great read here on copyright as a colonial endeavor. This is one of the sections that I think is unique to our project that you wouldn't stumble across in other guidelines focused on how to write or revise a textbook. Now, throughout the different modules, we've included H5P activities to provide a place for interactive self-checks as participants are reading through the content. Here is one self-check, but I want to take you to Module 3. This section is on figure captions, alt text, and image descriptions. And if you're familiar with these, you might counter that these definitions are pretty straightforward. I've found that they're not all the time, especially for authors who are new to the process of writing or adapting textbook content. If we look at the self-comprehension check here, you'll find the Wheel of Power and Privilege image with 4 hotspot icons describing parts of the figure. So this describes alt text and what it is and how to write it, the figure number, the figure caption, and the image description. And then the attributions and license is a part of that. Another example activity that is not an H5P is in Module 1. in the section on language. In this section, the call-out box is used to highlight this activity, looking for problematic elements within a passage. And this gives the user an opportunity to see what they've read explained through a specific example. And also then we have a reflection as well as other supporting elements here.
Now that you've had a chance to check out doing the work, we wanted to talk with you about some realistic implementation strategies. We recommend scoping training content to be short and manageable, what is most important for authors to be able to apply in their projects. We also recommend that you space modules out over time to allow authors to complete activities and build momentum. However, we also encourage you to be flexible and accommodating, because while we envisioned our training to be a week-by-week collaboration, both to manage the workload and give our leadership team time for turnaround on comments, some authors completed the entire project over the span of a weekend. At the same time, others needed gentle, persistent reminders to be able to center the work and complete the apply and submit. So recognizing flexibility and making space for agency was important to us in this project. While our synchronous sessions were not very well attended for those who came, they were transformational. Even if there's low attendance, we encourage creating this option for author teams because the benefit was so significant for those that wanted to engage in real time around their thinking and application of activities. And finally, while we wanted everything to be in one place, we did need to use a sequence of actions for authors to complete each activity and alert our team that it was ready for feedback. We kept the sequence predictable to minimize confusion, and we included instructions and links in the pressbook itself for ease of use. This has been a great collaborative effort, and we look forward to inviting you into the collaboration. Please let us know if you decide to adapt parts of this toolkit and how it goes with your own author teams. Please be in touch with questions or to continue the conversation. Thank you so much for your time.